The Celtics took a 2-0 lead in the East quarterfinals against the Atlanta Hawks, and joining us here for an afternoon edition of the show before we head down to Atlanta, Kevin Chouinard. Coming to us from Atlanta?
Yes, sir.
All right. Tough series so far for Atlanta. Probably kind of gotten off to a worse start for them, going down 30 in game 1, going down 22 in game 2, making up a little ground in each of these second halves, maybe finding some areas that they can exploit into these Atlanta games. I know Dejounte Murray shared an upbeat tone last night about going home and taking a game or two in that building. So far, though, I don't see a ton from this Hawks team in terms of being able to compete with the Celtics, despite their rebounding and shot advantage.
Yeah, the Hawks have done well to get more shot attempts than the Celtics, but I think it's been, discouraging in a few ways. I think maybe the most discouraging thing was that in the first game, they didn't adjust quickly to the Celtics playing a lot of 5-out offense with Horford at center. I actually thought they got better at that in game 2. There were other problems that masked it, but in the first game, the number one problem was that, Tatum was getting by DeAndre with no help behind him. It was just 5 out. Capella was out in the corner with Horford, and, with no second line to defense, it's just going to be really hard to guard Tatum one-on-one when his three-point shot is also falling. So I thought it was very important that the Hawks established something in game 2 where they looked like they were more ready for that. And I thought they were more ready for that in game 2. And I thought they played a good first quarter. And then there were, some other issues that they did not deal well with. I thought the transition defense in particular was something that really kind of needed to be ironed out in game 2. I thought that kind of got to them. As well as just turnovers. The number of turnovers that the Hawks had in the first half really kind of killed them, because I thought if they had, made more shots and or just taken shots where they could get their defense set, they would have been in a better position. But they were turning, live ball turnovers on a night when you're already playing bad transition defense was just a terrible combination.
Yeah, and it starts with Trae. Really struggling in the series so far, especially with setting the table offensively. He got blocked 4 times in this game, which are probably just as devastating from a turnover perspective and in terms of sending the Celtics back the other way.
Yeah.
He's getting switches. He's trying to attack and exploit guys, and that hasn't worked for him. The pick and roll with Capella hasn't developed often in this series. I think Capella only has 12 shots in 2 games. I don't know how they go about freeing Young, but that looks like the key for them unlocking some kind of offense here against Boston, who's sporting 100 defensive rating so far, which is just a devastating number for Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, it is a Trae issue, but Trae is drawing the ire of the defense. Like, they're focused on Trae.
Yeah.
In pick and roll, they're bringing in help from the corners. So when Trae and Capella run a pick and roll, Horford is doing the smart thing, which is, unlike a lot of drop centers, he's not dropped all the way back. He's only dropped back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, the one of the best things that Trae does on offense besides pass is hit the floater from 12, 13 feet. Horford is up, and he's trying to take that away. And the only way that works is if Horford has some help and, the guard has some help dealing with Capella on the roll. And to do that, they're bringing in defenders, from the forward position, Marcus Smart. If White is on Trae, Marcus Smart is digging down. Jason Tatum is digging down, and they're coming from the corners, pinching in to make sure that, there's enough help for Capella rolling to the rim that Horford can be up on Trae like that. So, really what they're going to have to do is they're just going to have to make more shots. The number of threes that the Hawks got up last night was an astounding number for them. They haven't been a high volume 3-point shooting team, but that's what Boston was giving them. They were saying, okay, it's not going to be Trae, but, for Dejounte Murray, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, you take all the threes you want. We're going to stop the pick and roll. We're going to take away the floater. We're going to have Derrick White on Trae, making sure he doesn't get quality 3-point looks. And it's everybody else has to make threes. And they got the attempts up. Dejounte Murray made a bunch, but they're going to need some more from someplace else to make that formula work.
And that Murray run probably was the best moment in the series for them so far. I think he got them within 8 in that second half. Just went on this great run, attacking the basket and pulling up from 3 there on the ball. You see the potential of him playing with the ball in his hands there. And I know that's been the thing all year they've tried to figure out is how to balance those two guys and get them both opportunities to play on and off the ball. Easier said than done, especially when you change the coach mid-season, and that's another factor here I think we have to consider is Snyder implementing, as you said, that 3-point volume and everything else he wants to shift this team toward. But in terms of freeing up Young a little bit, does it have to be a little more Murray ball time? Does Bogdanovich factor into that? Because he's been pretty good in the moments he's gotten the ball in his hands too in this series.
Yeah, I think Bogdanovich is a big factor. I think they need more playmaking. They need more passing. They need more shooting. I thought an interesting moment came late in the first quarter when Robert Williams came in. That shifted Horford to power forward. And when Bogdanovich came in, Bogdanovich was guarding Horford.
Mm-hmm.
And, when Horford's not at center, I kind of like that. He's not going to have a lot of room down low to post up because Williams is in the game too. I like that matchup. Later in the quarter, Hauser came in and Bogdanovich switched to Hauser. And I didn't like that at all because Bogdanovich is not fleet of foot, but he's a sharp defender in that he's strong. He pays attention to the team scheme so that he knows exactly when and how he's supposed to be helping. But when he offers that help and then has to, recover on a pass to his man and close out, he struggles getting there on time. And of all the people in the world, you don't want him closing out on Hauser, who's shooting like 80% against the Hawks this season or something.
And what do you think of that Murray usage so far in this series?
I mean, I think it's been fine. Against a team that's going to key on Trae and switch a lot of other stuff, you're going to need somebody who can, make a one-on-one move. And that's, of all the perimeter options that aren't Trae or Bogdanovich, that's certainly got to be Dejounte Murray. And he's risen to the challenge. I thought he came out nice and aggressive in game 1, didn't look fazed by the moment. He's certainly helped by the fact that that the defense is really focused on Trae, but he's been everything that they could ask for from an offensive standpoint. You wanted that secondary creator. They didn't have it last year when they struggled against a Miami team that wasn't as good as this Boston team is.
Yeah.
And you can see that secondary creation is paying off. They needed that. They didn't have it. They've got it now, but the problems, lie in other areas.
Yeah, for sure, especially in the front court right now. Hunter's struggling to shoot. Capella, as we said, 12 shots so far, and he mentioned after practice in game 1 getting stretched out by Horford. The way he does puts a massive burden on him, and you just see the impact Horford has at this point in his career. I know for you guys down there in Atlanta, he just started shooting that 3 during his time with the Hawks, and now I was just looking, the most threes by a center in playoff history by a wide margin over Jokic. I think it's 125-86 or so at this point. And his impact on this series has been pretty extraordinary. So you see the Celtics front court just dominating that Capella-Collins combo. And for Collins, I mean, he's been in these trade rumors for a couple of years now. They've tried to figure out across 3 coaches where he fits best. He had that great season, I think it was 2021, where he's hitting threes, he's rebounding at a high rate, he's developing some chemistry with Young there. And in these games, a couple years later, just see him putting up threes, not finding that shot. I think he's 1 for 8 so far in this series, not in a lot of actions, just sort of floating out there. And he's not a guy that can space out that defense the way he's shooting right now. So it's a tough guy to play, especially when he's not really a positive defender either.
Well, he's a positive defender. I don't think
you like his defense
at all. Yeah, he's a plus on defense for sure. But offensively, yeah, you have to wonder. Like, I don't know that he's necessarily a Quinn Snyder fit in terms of what Snyder would typically want from a power forward in terms of spacing. It's funny because you can see the effect of scheming and having a long time to prepare. Because I think the most noticeable thing since Quinn Snyder took over was that The offense picked up. The floor balance was better. There was better spacing, better floor balance. And, within weeks of Snyder taking over, the way that the offense was run was instantly getting Okongwu and Capella better looks at the rim. There was a month, I guess it must have been March, where both of them shot over 70% from the field. Like right after Quinn took over, he took over late February. The month of March, they both shot 70% from the field, which is essentially just shots at the rim, but they're getting, a decent volume. They're getting quality looks at the rim and converting them because they both have nice touch around the rim. And then you see in this series, that's not the case at all. Again, the help is coming in from the sides. There's a lot of conflict in the paint. There are just too many bodies down there, and they just don't look comfortable. And it's the same thing with Collins because, from March 1st onward, he kind of fixed his three-point shooting problem that he had earlier in the season. He was shooting like 25% up until then. March 1, he starts working with Korver. Snyder takes over. The offense smooths out a little bit, and he's hitting, 35, 40% of his threes. And in this series, he's just sort of looked uncomfortable. It's a small 2-game sample, but, I just think that, Boston has done a really good job of scheming up, taking away the Hawks' strengths and leaving them to play with their weaknesses.
Yeah, and it is awkward, as you mentioned, with Snyder coming in, having to change as much as he has to in 20, 30 games. Not easy. I asked him about that before game 2, just how tough that is, because you don't see it often. And Prenti took over for a couple games there. You thought maybe he'll finish that season out, but they go out and get their guy in Snyder, a great coach. I think a huge get for them. When you talk about options around the league, he's probably near the top of the list in terms of guys you want. But you mentioned how these guys fit in that system, how they adjust to that system. I think game 1, they hesitate to shoot the 3 a little bit, and he wants them getting a lot of threes up. You have to against the Celtics because they're going to be putting 40, 50 up. But you wonder how many of these guys can knock them down at a high enough rate to make it that big of a part of their offense. The other little areas that they're trying to key in on, offensive rebounding, started great in this series. Celtics sort of adjusted to that, and that hasn't made as big of an impact as I think they would have hoped. I like a lot of the things Snyder is trying to implement now, and in terms of the time he has, it's pretty impressive what they've been able to become in terms of an identity late this season. But it is tough when you talk about a coach needing to figure everything out over a 20, 30 game span and then into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short amount of time. I think the Celtics maybe have one loss total in Boston since Quinn took over.
Yeah.
So the fact that the Hawks came in and lost 2 games in Boston, it's not like, a gigantic shock or a gigantic disappointment. I mean, Boston is a game away from having the best record in the NBA, and they won 2 games at home. And like I said, if there's any disappointment, it's maybe that it took the Hawks a while to get their defense adjusted to Boston's offense in game 1. But other than that, I think that they're making the right moves and trying to do the right things. I think Snyder's doing a great job running the team, and, Hunter and Collins are perfectly capable of making shots. Like, there's some 3-point variance. Boston is absolutely a better 3-point shooting team than the Hawks are. But at the same time, what's Boston shooting from 3 in the series? And, like 46%. And the Hawks are at like 33%. Like, the Boston should be better at threes than the Hawks, but they probably shouldn't be a 12 percentage point differential. Like, there's some the threes that the Hawks are getting are pretty good. And, the guys that are shooting them are 35% kind of 3-point shooters. Like, I don't know. Like, it's not a shock. Like, I think the Hawks will do better in Atlanta, but at the same time, I don't think there's anything here that necessarily mandates that something wrong and the Hawks need a gigantic change. I think with a more seasoning under Snyder's system, they'll be just fine.
Yeah, and I do like some of the progress they're making in that department. It looks like there's a plan here. It looks like there's a foundation they're trying to build, and then in the offseason, you make whatever roster tinkering you want to make. It is a crowded roster at a lot of different positions. There's young guys waiting for opportunities. I think they're going to have to sort out down the line here. But what they have right now I do generally agree. Like those shot totals, I think that's a huge plus for them in terms of it. I know Joe Mazzulla was concerned going down to Atlanta about that. The 3-point volume is exactly what they need to do. And as you said, in that first quarter, they did have the Celtics on their toes a little bit. It backed up with an early 8-point deficit there. And then it was just those turnovers that sent the Celtics out in transition. And I think it was like a string of Tatum baskets there in that second quarter, which, the Hawks have to do a better job getting back on to defend there. I mean, there was like 3-4 layup line dunks, breakout plays that just devastated them and then ended up putting them behind double digits.
Yeah, I mean, Tatum is going to get his. I think the thing that really killed him was the quick seals by Robert Williams in transition.
Yes.
The Celtics were pushing the pace to the point where, in transition defense, the object isn't always to get to your man. It's, goal one, get somebody at the rim to protect the rim, then make sure that, first of all, stop the ball, and then, stop the rim, and then fan out to the shooters from there. The Hawks weren't able to get a center on Williams on some of those quick seals. So he's getting down in transition. He's plopping himself smack dab in the middle of the paint, getting a seal on Bogdanovich or whoever. And then, the ball comes in, he gets a quick pivot move and he scores. Though, I don't know what he shot in game 2. I don't have the stats right here in front of me, but he got, 15, 16 points, without having to take a shot that was low quality. So they've got to figure out, I think, most of all, just how to stop that. You have to have better transition defense. You've got to make sure that that he's not getting those quick seal sort of half transition baskets right at the rim. And some of them he was in the paint for like 4 or 5 seconds. So they've got to whisper to the referee, hey, watch that tonight, please.
Yeah, 20 points through 2 games for Rob Williams on 11 of 12, I think.
Yeah,
just one miss for him.
You can't have that happen. Like, Tatum's going to get his. Brown's going to get his. Like, those points are going to come, but you can't let Robert Williams shoot 90% against you on a night when your centers aren't getting those kind of easy looks at the rim.
Yeah, and right now, I guess going into game 3, Celtics still with a 5-point edge there in terms of the line. And we're, of course, brought to you here by FanDuel. Quick shout out to them. FanDuel.com/Boston. Going to get you $200 in bonus bets when you first place your first $5 bet, $10 first deposit required. They are the official sportsbook of MLB, and baseball is rolling as well. The Red Sox are really struggling. How are the Braves doing, Kevin?
I have no idea. I think they're good.
A baseball
I'm
guy?
not really a baseball guy. I am not.
Hey.
Basketball.
Hey, it's not that time of year anyway.
Yeah, I like to play basketball, so I don't know if you could see my son here. It's gotten nice and sunny in Atlanta, and we can play basketball outside in 80-degree heat every day, and it's just fantastic. So I am loving that, but I'm never
excited for that.
I was a Jim Rice guy back in the day, so I can offer that.
There's that. Again, a shout out to them. They've been in Mass for a month and a half now, and they're still offering $200 bonus bets when you head over to FanDuel.com/Boston. Again, $10 deposit, $5 first bet, $200 in bonus bets. Go to FanDuel.com/Boston and make every moment more with America's #1 sports book. So, back to Atlanta. You said you don't see the Hawks need to make a ton of adjustments, but if you did have to point to one area where you would switch something up, you think that they might switch something up going into these games 3 and 4 down there, what do you think that area will be?
After game 1, I thought that they needed to try to overlap Capella's minutes more with Robert Williams's minutes. But after game 2, I don't know. Like I said, I thought Capella did a much better job of being impactful at the rim while also sort of keeping an eye on Horford. So, I don't know. I think they need to get Trae comfortable somehow, whether it's shooting or passing. I think that's the biggest thing that they've got to do is, if he's going to have the ball as much as he does, even if the defense is keying on him, and White is outstanding. Like White, when Trae came into the league, He gets drafted, June 25th or whatever, when Trae comes into the league. A week later, he's in Utah playing Utah Summer League, Salt Lake City Utah Summer League, I guess is what it was called. And
Yeah,
Derrick White's on the Spurs guarding him, and he went like 0 for 10 in his first preseason game. White's just
I remember
always been
that.
a tough
Yeah.
matchup for him. So, they've got to find a way to get him comfortable. And he's a absolutely brilliant, savant offensive player. But the Celtics are just throwing so much at him. So, if they're really going to put that much at him, then it probably has to be passing wise. They've got to find a way to get him comfortable as a passer. And I don't think that he's really gotten comfortable as a passer yet. The passes that he's making are just sort of passes to get off the ball because there are too many bodies around him. They've got to find a way for him to sort of pass to daylight so that they're getting easy offense when there's as much attention on him as there is. And I'd have to go and think about it and look at X's and O's to figure out exactly what that is. But I think that's really the key. Let Trae find his comfort zone. And he's a good enough shooter and passer that he can usually get to one of them. But right now, it's been a struggle because Boston has been great on defense.
Yeah, and you mentioned Horford dropping. Is that just what's cutting off that pick and roll right now? Because that's where he seems most comfortable to me, is getting that pick and roll off with Capella and hitting him on those lobs.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the basic thing that they do most is that they run pick and roll, and Trae can just do so much. He usually has the option of a floater or a lob, take one of those away. And the only way you can really take one of those away is to bring a third defender in. The Celtics have been more than willing to do that. So now it's, how do you get good offense once the ball goes out to your 3s and 4s? Like, once it's in Hunter's hand, once it's in Collins' hands, how are things set up at that point? One of the things that Snyder has hammered over and over again since he's gotten here is we've got to get better at second actions. We've got to get better at second actions. Once the initial action has taken place and you haven't just gotten that easy look, what happens next? He's talked about that a lot. And so, that really is what they've got to do. You run the pick and roll, you make them commit to something. Okay, what happens next? And I think they've got to sort of figure out what those second actions are, because, like I said, I really believe that Boston is committing a lot to Trae. There should be some leaks, some seams, something somewhere, and they haven't been really able to find it yet.
Yeah. And what stands out to you most about the Celtics so far on their side? Because they've dominated defensively. I think they're hitting their stride on that end, which I had some concerns throughout the year about the forcefulness they played with on that end. The numbers look great all year, but you didn't quite see the disruptiveness. And now you're seeing it in this series with the switching, with 12 blocks last game, and the forced turnovers starting to ramp up too. They can just be such a dominant team on that end of the ball. But what sticks out to you most about where they've succeeded so far in this series?
On either end, I mean, White has been great. Like, how many defenders in the NBA are better on ball than White right now? Like, he's just, there are a lot of great defenders, but the guys that are in consideration.
I'm surprised he didn't get a Defensive Player of the Year vote,
Went
by the way.
not in any way. Yeah.
Not one. No Celtics player got Defensive
Sometimes
Player of
that
the Year
award
vote, which
just
was
lags
sad
by
as
a couple of years. So, by the time you get around to winning it, you've almost decreased from your apex. It takes a while for defense to seep in on voters' minds. So, maybe that's coming down the line at some point. Especially if Boston has a deep postseason run and viewers see what his defense looks like in late May and June. Maybe that's coming, but yeah, I think that's the first thing. And I guess maybe the commitment to team rebounding. Since Snyder took over, the Hawks have been the number 1 offensive rebounding team by percentage. And the Celtics, when you're playing Horford at center, it seems like that should be a vulnerability, but the Celtics kind of do a couple of things. One is they just, bring in so many bodies, they kind of gang rebound and hit the defensive glass pretty well. And number 2 is, like, if they give up an offensive rebound, they've been really good defending after the offensive rebound has been conceded. When the Hawks get an offensive rebound, I should have had more numbers here at the ready, but I want to say that somebody said that they scored like 13 points on 19 offensive rebounds, which is like, you should be able to do better than like that. That's a low number for 19 offensive rebounds. So, looking at the balance between second chance points and offensive rebounds, they've done a strong job defending after offensive rebounds.
Yeah, I'm looking at least putbacks right now, and that's not everything, but 0.87 points per possession on putbacks in this series.
That's probably not a good putback number.
Yeah, not quite. 40th percentile in the playoffs so far. Yeah, leaning on those is tough though. If you just lean on stacking up a bunch of offensive rebounds, you're probably missing a lot of shots, which they certainly have so far in this series. Do you look at the Celtics as title favorites?
Absolutely.
The way
and the other thing is like you look at this Hawks team and it's like this is really a team that is well constructed to deal with Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like there are other teams in the East that I think the Hawks match up much better with. I think that ideally they just would do better against them. Like I think if the Hawks played Golden State, I think Golden State's a little bit like Boston and they kind of stretch you out. And your bigs end up being a little bit less effective. I think the Hawks have some better matchups. So I think that the Celtics are both a real contender. Like you look at computer models and some of them just have ridiculous odds on, whether or not the Celtics will win a championship. Like they give them like 30% chance of winning the championship, which is, a lot when there are 16 teams still left. Like I think they're well liked by computer models as a real favorite. And I also think that they're sort of the worst type of team for the Hawks to guard. I think they're better against some methodical, bigger teams than they are against one that really spreads you out as much as the Celtics do.
Yeah, the roster building's been amazing here, especially when you look at that backcourt. It's the worst one the Hawks could have lined up against. It's just a brutal matchup in a lot of areas for Atlanta. But when you think of Smart, Brogdon, and White's defense, and really the defense across the board here, they can switch anything. And that's where Young's having the most trouble, it seems, is that no matter who he switches on to, it's a problem to score on. I even saw Sam Hauser giving him some trouble in that first half.
Well, they were cheating. They were cheating help to him. Like there was one late in the first quarter where, it was kind of a matchup between Trae and Hauser, but the double was like halfway over. And Trae has to get off the ball. And I know, he's probably, heard in practice, hey, if you get the switch on Hauser. I thought in game one, the Hawks did pretty well trying to get switches on to Hauser and doing stuff there. But in game two, it felt like the Celtics were giving him more help. And the Hawks didn't do a good job of recognizing that and getting off the ball.
And what impresses you most about Joe Mazzulla taking over this team this year compared to what you saw from the Celtics in the playoffs last year under Udoka?
Is there like a no? I mean, it just feels like there's no. Again, I don't feel like an expert enough to really qualify the comment there, but it does feel like there's just a lot of continuity. It doesn't feel to me like Boston is doing a whole lot differently. I guess if there's one thing that seems different, it's that Hauser's playing instead of Grant Williams. And, at least for right now, that you can't argue with that's been a recipe for success. I think they've done well to play Hauser. I think maybe if you see Milwaukee or Philadelphia down the line, then Grant Williams maybe comes back and Hauser, you don't see him as much. But for right now, it's, I think that was a good decision. And other than that, it just seems like there's no real drop off from one season to the next, that they've been consistent in what they do.
Yeah, that 3-point volume is what it is for me. It makes a big impact, and you get worried. Like I've been worried at certain points this year. I'm like, oh, you're gonna live and die by the three. That can be a tricky thing. And they have a decent record when they shoot below the league average from three. I think it's at 13-19. I think it got to that point by the end of the year, and then they've only lost 5 games all year when they've shot over that mark. That 3-point volume has opened up Tatum and Brown's games, and you talked about the spacing too. It's just so hard for so many of these teams to counteract, especially in the East, where you have the Hawks built around Capella, you have the Sixers built around Embiid, Giannis with Milwaukee. There's so many teams that need to keep their center on the floor. And then on the other hand, the Celtics have 2 center options, and Grant's disappearance here is a little concerning to me, especially when you factor in how he'll need to be available for those other matchups down the line. But overall, when you're stacking up good things here and concerns, that concern list is just growing so much smaller. And the good things you're seeing from this team have just maximized this year. Of course, they've taken many steps, becoming the number 2 offense, number 2 defense this year. So despite concerns I had during the year, I think I got them back in the finals there, and it's going to depend on who they play when they get there, whether they win or not. I think there's some teams out west that can probably bother them a little bit, but then there's some others that I think they just have a really, really good shot against out there.
Yeah, I mean, I thought last year that the East was better than the West. I thought the Bucks were the best team last year, and then you just watch that Bucks Celtics series, and they just bludgeoned each other to death. So by the time Boston got to the finals, it was like they were cooked. They were just beat up.
I'm interested to see what that's going to look like.
Game at the highest level.
Yeah, Miami too. Miami stretched that series out, and that added some fatigue, and that's another physical defensive series. Probably one of the ugliest East finals ever.
That's part of the peril, right? Like, we've talked about, the Celtics playing 5 out, and like, okay, you play these guys and they're not as big, and you're asking them to take on this taxing physical burden. And to do it for 16 wins, like it's a long road. It goes a couple of months. By the end, I would be very concerned. Are they going to hold up? Like, it's a wonderfully talented team with this brilliant scheme. It works. It punishes teams. But in some respects, it also punishes yourself physically. And so that might be the biggest question for Boston is, okay, if you play this small ball and crash these little guys to the glass, and relatively little by NBA terms. Obviously, Tatum and Brown are huge by regular human standards, but like, there's only so many times you can get in front of Giannis and take a charge and feel good about it.
Oh yeah, especially if you're White, Smart. Some of these guys have had ailments. They're healthy right now,
and the Hawks are
so
healthy too. That's why I
honestly
thought, and I still kind of think that this, has the makings of a competitive series. I don't think the Hawks have done a whole lot wrong. I think Boston's done a good job of finding kind of some small things, some wounds to pick at. But overall, like scheme-wise, talent-wise, health-wise, like the Hawks are kind of like right there. Like I thought they made the right adjustment from game 1 to game 2, and I still kind of believe them. They just, they need the Celtics to not shoot as well from 3, basically. And if that happens at home, I think the Hawks win the game. Like if they keep shooting 45% from 3 every game, Hawks are cooked. But, when the 3-point variance comes down, especially in Atlanta, like I think these are going to be competitive, winnable games. And then all of a sudden it's game 5 back in Boston, and maybe the Hawks have a chance at that point. But, we'll see.
How confident are you that they're going to be able to take one?
I think they have to take game 3. I think if you don't take game 3, then you're just cooked mentally. So, I don't think they have to do a whole lot different. They just sort of have to believe in themselves and, make enough shots that they're making shots on the level with the Celtics, which is a challenge. The Celtics are absolutely a better shooting team than the Hawks, but it just not to the degree that we've seen so far in the series. So you've got to taper that down a little bit, be more productive with your offensive rebounds. And, I think at that point, if you're making good decisions, it's a basketball game that they're more than capable of winning. So we'll see.
We will see. Friday night in Atlanta is game 3. Of course, give Kevin a follow. I've loved his Hawks coverage throughout this series. He had some film from game 2 up this morning over there as well. Hawks.com, ATL, and 29 podcast, as well as Hawks on Bali. Kevin, great to talk to you here today. Thanks for the insight, and hopefully we'll catch you down in Atlanta. I'm heading down tonight.
Well, enjoy your trip. The weather is going to be absolutely beautiful. So maybe not Saturday, but the rest of the time it's 80 degrees and sunny. I'm looking at my window and it's just absolutely gorgeous. So enjoy your time here.
I love it. Hey, give him a follow again at KL Chouinard, CHOUINRNARD. Kevin, have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, and thanks for joining us here this afternoon. As I said, we're heading down to Atlanta, so follow us down there. Joe Sway's going, Amit's going. I'm heading down the earliest, as I said, tonight. So go to Celtics CLNS and subscribe over there if you're watching on the main channel. If you're watching on Celtics All Access, head to that main channel. That's where you're going to get all the pressers, practice coverage tomorrow. Of course, show FanDuel some love, FanDuel.com/Boston if you're looking to bet on this series, and it's Tough one to bet on at this point. The odds are stacked against picking the Celtics, but if you do feel like Kevin did good about the Hawks taking a game down there, some really good odds on that. +5 plus odds for game 3. That can be a swing game in these series. If there is any that they're going to win, it's probably going to be that game 3. So check that out. And we're also, of course, as always, brought to you by Athletic Greens, athleticgreens.com/garden. Going to get you 5 free travel packs of their great powder with vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, probiotics, and more. I use it every morning. One delicious scoop. All of those ingredients are going into you. Things you can get in different places that focus on energy, recovering, focus, and aging. But they're all in one with AG1, which makes it the best way to start your day, guaranteeing that you are going to get all these things your body needs. And of course, to make it easy, they're going to give you that year's supply of immune-boosting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to athleticgreens.com/garden. athleticgreens.com/garden. Take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. That's athleticgreens.com/garden. And welcoming back to the Garden Report, one of our favorite sponsors as well, BetterHelp. BetterHelp, of course, for me, means a lot because I've gone through that process of looking for therapists, and it can be a grind. It can be confusing. And while you're already in a spot where you need to talk to a therapist, it's not great to be going through that stress and confusion and uncertainty. BetterHelp, head over there. And the key for them is that they're going to connect you with licensed therapists through your phone. You feel like your best self. I mean, it's crucial to feel like your best self because it's going to impact the other areas of your life, your productivity, your self-confidence, your ability to just be consistent day in and day out. For me, I think is the big one. So talking with a therapist can help you get closer to that best version of you. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. BetterHelp.com/garden will get you 10% off your first month. It's crucial. Again, like I said, licensed therapists on your phone, convenient around your schedule, I think is important too, because people live such busy lives that they might not be able to make time for this. But again, you don't have to be dealing with a crisis. You don't have to be dealing with this huge catastrophe to go get therapy. You might just need someone to talk to. And I think BetterHelp makes it easy, accessible, and flexible, which is key. BetterHelp is a great option. Convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. You can try therapists. You can try a new therapist. If this one isn't working for you, try a bunch. Stay with the same one. Change down the line too. Again, 10% off your first month. Give it a shot. BetterHelp.com/garden. That's it. Appreciate you guys. We will see you down in Atlanta. Maybe do a live show tomorrow as well. And again, thanks to Kevin Chouinard, who brought some great information there. Game 3 is on Friday, 7:30 tip-off. We'll be live after. Check out last night's show for all the reaction from John, Jimmy, and all of them if you missed that. And again, see you down in Atlanta. I'm Bobby Manning for the Garden Report for CLNS Media.